start with our wet ingredients because these are some easier measurements so we can kind of start getting the idea of it. So, for example, if I have 2 large eggs in my original recipe, how many eggs am I going to end up with if I double it?
4 large eggs.
Exactly, 4 large eggs. And of course, where else can we see a measurement of 2?
In the tablespoons of water.
All right, so it's going to be the same. Now, if we have 2 large eggs becomes 4 large eggs, our 2 tablespoons of water are going to become 4, right? We all know no matter, the number is going to be the same. It's going to be how we measure it that changes. And now we get to our fractions. So if we start with 1/2 of a cup of olive oil, we're gonna write a math sentence with multiplication. So we're gonna end up with 1/2 times 2. So when we multiply fractions by a whole number, we're always going to multiply our numerator, or say the numbers on top, okay? So if you have some problems remembering that that's what we're supposed to do, we can go back to a lesson from a while ago, and we can remember that if we have a whole number, it can also be represented as a fraction over 1, right? Because we remember any number divided by itself is itself, okay? So 2 over 1 is the same as saying 2. So if we're having trouble remembering where we're supposed to divide, we convert it into a fraction, and that will help us remember where we are supposed to multiply our numbers. So then we're going to end up with what is going to be our denominator. If we have 1/2 times 2.
2.
2, right? And what is going to be our numerator then?
Also 2.
Also 2. So this is something interesting about fractions, right? So I can sit here and I can add 1/2 plus 1/2, right? And I can have my cups of olive oil that I need. Or we can multiply it out, and what is 2 over 2 if we reduced it further?
1.
1, okay? So, or I can just measure 1 simple cup of olive oil, and I have the amount that I need, okay? And if we have 1/2 of a cup of olive oil, how much will it be if we double our 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla?
It would be 1 whole teaspoon of vanilla.
Exactly, okay?
Because independently on what the measuring utensil used, the important is how much of it.
Exactly, very good. Any doubts so far?
Everything is very clear.
Very good. All right, so we're gonna move on to our dry ingredients. We're gonna ignore our sugar for the moment because that requires an extra step and some different strategies. So we can go through and do some of our classic fractions first. The first ones, I think, what do you think would be the easiest fractions to?
The half fractions, because we have already done them.
We've already done the measurement, exactly. So our 1/2 of a cup of powdered sugar is going to become 1 cup of powdered sugar. Our 1/2 of a cup of dark chocolate chips is going to become 1 cup of chocolate chips. We're gonna do the same multiplication strategy for our other fractions. So for example, if we start with 3/4, we're gonna multiply by 2. And where do we multiply by, the numerator or the denominator?
The numerator.
The numerator, right? So if we're comfortable with that, if we don't need a reminder, we can multiply it through. So what is our denominator going to be?
It's going to be 6/4.
It's going to be 6/4, very good. So we did the extra step already. So we have 6/4. The problem is if we look at my measuring cups, do I have any of them that say 6/4?
No.
No, so we have some options now. We can either take my 1/4 and I can add it 6 times, right? I could take my 3/4 and I could do it 2 times. I can measure it twice, 3/4 plus 3/4. However, that's going to give me some extra steps. I'm gonna have to do some extra work, right? What if I reduce 6/4? What do I end up with?
1 and 2/4.
1 and 2/4. And we already know from our warm-up, can we reduce 2/4?
1.5.
1.5, exactly. So we're gonna end up with 1.5 and flour, all-purpose flour that we've already talked about, and also 1.5 teaspoons of salt.
Yes.
Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing, but with 2/3. So I would like you to do this calculation on your own and then tell me what it is. So 2/3 doubled.
So, 2/3 doubled would be 4/3.
Very good job.
Which, if we break it down, because we could use, as you said, 4/3 cups to measure it,
Very good.
but it would be easier to have 1 whole cup and 1/3.
Very good. So as you said, we can just add our thirds together. We can measure 1/3 4 times, or we can make it easier ourselves, make 1 cup and 1/3. Excellent job. All right, so now we're going to get to our mixed number. And we have 2 strategies we're going to use to convert a mixed number and double it or triple it or whatever we need to do with our recipe, okay? We're going to do the one that maybe is a little bit more complicated first, and then we're going to do the one that uses strategies that we already know from other things that we have learned in math class this year. So if we have 1.5, if we're going to convert it to an improper fraction, that's our first step. So step 1 is to convert it. In order to do that, we have to make 1 into a fraction. And what do you think? What is 1 equal to as a fraction?
2
2 halves, right? So we're going to have 2 halves plus 1 half. So what is our 1.5 becomes? If we have 2 halves
3
plus 1.
2s.
3 halves.
3 halves.
Exactly. Very good. 3 halves. So now that's our first step. We've converted it, so now we have a fraction to work with. Now we can do the exact same thing that we have been doing with our wet ingredients and our other dry ingredients. We have 3 halves, and we're going to double it and have the same equation as we've been using. So what is 3 halves times 2?
6 halves.
6 halves, and we discovered this in our warm-up as well. 6 halves becomes what number?
3.
3, right? So it becomes a nice whole number for us to use. So our final answer, we're going to end up with 3 cups of sugar. Right, if we think about recipes, this also makes sense with what we know about dessert, right? Dessert typically has a lot more sugar than other ingredients. So we can also know that we have done our math correctly because it makes sense with what we know about the real world, right? Our other strategy is going to be using what we already know about math. So how would we read this number?
1.5.
1.5, right? In math, what does the and represent?
Addition.
Addition, right? So we can create a math sentence with 1.5. We have 1 plus 1/2. Now we can multiply by 2. And we know that when we multiply, we have to multiply each segment of our math sentence. So the first step is going to be multiplying the 1 by 2, which is
2.
2, right? We all know that very well. And now we're going to have the same math of a whole number times a fraction that we've been doing for the last couple minutes, right? So what is 2 times 1/2?
2 2s or 1.
Right? 2 2s, which becomes 1. Okay, so if we have 2 plus 1, what do we end up with?
3.
3. Okay, so we can use both these strategies if we have time and we want to double check that our math is correct. If we end up with the same answer, we've done it correctly, right? Or maybe we've gone somewhere astray and we can get some more help later. All right, so the last part that I want us to do is we're going to look at this recipe here, which is for a white cake, okay? And I'm not a big fan of cake, but some people do, so maybe instead of brownies, I'll make a cake for my friends instead. However, with this one, our serving size is 8. So if I have 20 friends and I double the serving size, what do I get?
16.
16. Am I going to have enough pieces for everybody?
No.
No, so I'm going to triple it, so I have extra cake, right? Not enough cake. Okay, so we're going to use the same strategies we've been using, but this time instead of multiplying by 2, we are going to multiply by
3.
3, exactly. Right, we have some of them, again, just like the other recipe, are 1 cup of sugar, so we're going to multiply by a whole number, very easy, right, very simple. Our 2 large eggs, our 2 teaspoons of vanilla are going to be the simple ones that I recommend you all start with. And then after that, we're going to have our fractions, our 1/2, our 3/4, our 1/3. And then finally, I recommend that you leave the flour for the end. So we have our mixed number, and if you have any questions, you can ask me and I will help you go through the strategies again.
Thank you, Ms. Rebecca.